Hello, I'm Ashley. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm an addict. Since we're in treatment, I'll give you guys the full story tonight. Yeah, it's true. I did think Parrish sounded cool after hearing all of the crazy, horrible things about him. So that says a lot about me. So let's see. My sobriety date is February 22nd, 2020. I got sober when I was 29 years old. I'm 33 now. I always say my age because I always wonder how old people are when they're up here. And I kind of tell my story, with how old I was at the time. I'm always willing to spend my free time speaking at treatment centers, especially because I've been to treatment a bunch of times, and I am literally one decision away from being back in your seats. I know that for a fact. If I'm lucky, I would be in your seats. So I was born in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm going to start at the beginning. I was born in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm an only child. I was born to two parents who love me a lot. But when I was a kid, they couldn't really figure out how to make it work with each other. So when I was 3 years old, my parents got a divorce. Later on, they actually remarry each other, but that's way later. I was a only child raised by my mom. My dad's one of us. He isn't in the program. He also doesn't drink, but he is very obsessed with marijuana, like extremely. Him and my mom both really. So growing up, I was a pretty smart, happy, bright little girl. I was, really close to my mom, but I always felt a little bit off. I've always felt that I was a little bit different than other people, that I was kind of odd, maybe a little uncomfortable, I guess. I've always felt sort of uncomfortable in my skin, and that's sort of just something I've always had. And when I got into middle school, that was when that started to become a little bit more pronounced. I never liked large groups of people, such as this group that I'm with right now. And so when I started getting to school and growing up and realizing, I'm a little bit different than these kids. I was not raised religious at all. Both my parents are atheists, actually. So in my family, it was like a badge of honor to not believe in God. Like I was the smart one, And so I was raised in the Midwest, where most people are Lutherans and they're Catholic, and a lot of my friends would go to confirmation on Wednesday nights, and they would all go to church Sunday mornings. And I would go to church with them because I wanted to fit in, but they wouldn't let me go up to the front to get the body of Christ and the wine or whatever. And so I felt really excluded, and I felt that just played into more about how I felt different. And I knew that my life was different than theirs, because I remember this time I went to, there was a neighborhood Bible study in my neighborhood, and all my friends joined it, and so I went to join it too. And it's getting really hot in here. Can we turn the fan on a little higher? Thanks. And so I joined this little backyard Bible study. My mom was like, ugh, but she let me do it. And so when I got there, I remember them asking me if I knew John 3:16, which is something from the Bible. I still am not sure what. But I was like, I don't know it. And I remember all the adults going together and talking. And they had me go sit on the back patio by myself, and they all got together and talked, and then they came and they told me they didn't want me in their Bible study, and that I had to go home, and I was just heartbroken, and with my personality, I'm gonna try to be loud, guys. I had a fog machine blowing at me for 2 hours last night, so my voice is kind of shot right now, but I'm doing my best. Yeah, so with my personality, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm like, well, fuck you then. Yeah. I am going this way. And I really 5-year-old atheist, refusing to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I would get kicked out of choir classes if the word God was in the song. I was just very angry, I guess, at a very young age. And now I know that I'm an alcoholic. I can see the traits were there from a really young age. That I was very obstinate. I was difficult. If you told me no, I wanted to do it even more. I was emotional, clingy, all that stuff. also thought nobody liked me. That was something that I just kind of always had, like in middle school and high school. I remember in high school I was voted, I was on the homecoming royalty, and I was a freshman, and so I remember thinking that it was like a prank, or it was like a joke, that these people somehow by some they teamed up to be to bully me. And I was sure that it was a joke. And it wasn't until I got like older and got sober that I realized like I actually was on the homecoming royalty and nobody bullied me. Like there was no reason, but that's just how I felt all the time. I could have tons of friends, but I thought they all hated me, and I always felt alone. And so when I was in middle school and they would have the DARE program come in to tell us about the drugs that we shouldn't do, right? Some of us might remember that. Yeah, and they were like, ecstasy puts holes in your brain, and I thought all of it sounded great, and I wanted to try all of the drugs. I really did. And that was like my first. So I started, at 12 years old, like planning, like, all right, as soon as I can, I'm going to do these things. And I think the first time I drank, I was around 12. Me and my friend took my mom's rum, and we drink it, and I drank like all of it. Even at 12 years old, I thought that the rules were you were supposed to like bottoms up, drink it all, finish it, black out. And I blacked out the first time I ever drank too. And I thought that was normal. I remember talking to a coworker like a few years ago, and she told me she had never blacked out. And I was like, what? Like, you've never... I was bewildered that other people didn't black out, because I was a blackout drinker. I blacked out pretty much every time I drank towards the end, and most of the time. So the first time I drank, I blacked out, and one of us cut ourselves. I don't remember how. We had broken glass. Broken glass is a theme in my story. And there was like blood on the walls, and I was like 12, that's like, but so when I got into high school, I didn't really get a chance to try any drugs yet. I was still looking for them up until I started high school, but I was for sure going to smoke some weed. And I used to lie to people and tell them that I did smoke weed even before I did, because I wanted to be cool. And I just was sure that I was going to, like, that's going to be my life. I'm going to be a stoner. And so when I got to high school, I immediately found a boyfriend. He was a pot dealer, and he was older than me. And I found the other group of kids whose parents worked nights and whose dads were not there, and we went and smoked weed in their garages. And I started to try cocaine, mushrooms, Coricidin used to be a thing. I just did a lot of stupid shit. And but that was around the time I was getting into high school, and I went to a really big high school. There were like 700 kids in my graduating class, and like the school itself had almost 3,000 kids, and I hated it. Like I said, I don't like big crowds. I don't like super noisy places, like super busy stuff. And I started having really bad anxiety. And when I was 14, I had my first panic attack at school. And my mom took me to a psychiatrist who promptly sat forward and said, "Have you ever heard of Xanax?" And by that time, yes, I had. No, doctor. This was in 2004, when before we knew all the things that we know now, and before things were quite as regulated as we try to make them. And so I was put on an extremely high dose of benzodiazepines and a lot of other stuff at age 14. And that was when it started. It was by the time I was like 15 or 16, I realized how addicted to it I was. My prescriptions were beginning to be gone quicker and quicker, and I would run out, and I would be really sick. Just benzo withdrawals are horrible, and nobody taught me about addiction. I had no idea what was really happening. But around that time too, my dad was a truck driver, and he got into a really bad truck driving accident that almost killed him. And so he had every painkiller prescription you could imagine, the good stuff. And I started to learn that when I took his painkillers, the benzo withdrawals weren't as bad. And so I started, and obviously I became very addicted to both of them. And then I got to a point where I was stealing from work. I was stealing from my mom. I used to nod out driving like 80 miles an hour. Someone told me when I got sober to try to look for the times that a higher power was there, even in your addiction. Because even in my addiction, something was there that was leading me to where I'm at now. And when I think back to those times, falling asleep going 85 miles an hour down the interstate in traffic, like I feel like that might have been a higher power maybe keeping me safe or something, because there's a lot of stuff that I've survived that I really shouldn't have. Another time I remember being in a cop car and I was thinking about jumping out of it. And I fell asleep, which was really weird because I don't fall asleep sitting up. I don't even fall asleep on my side. Like I have to sleep on my stomach. Perfect conditions for me to sleep right. But somehow in that cop car, when I was thinking about jumping out of it, I fell asleep. And so when I get sober, I look for these little things of signs of something being there and protecting me before I actually made it to this room. And so by the time I graduate high school, I am very addicted to benzos and opiates. I still really wasn't into drinking. It wasn't totally my thing. I really thought I did not like drinking. Spoiler alert, I really do. But so I like I said, I was stealing from work. I was stealing from my mom. I did go to college, and I was sitting in my study hall one day in college, and there was a big glass wall. I just remember this so perfectly, and there was like snow falling, and like it was like finals or something, and my mom texted me, and she had caught me stealing from her bank account, and she texted me, "You need rehab." And I was like 18 or 19. And so I went to rehab for the first time. She flew me down to Florida. And that began like a 2-year period where I was in and out of rehab over and over and over and over. I don't remember how many times. I always hear people share and they're like, I went to rehab 11 times. I don't know. I really don't. There was one treatment center that they used to put tallies next to your name about the amount of times you'd been there, and I had 6 tallies at that place. But it's because I was not ready. I was still really young. I was batshit crazy, honestly. And my mom just kept putting me back into treatment. And I would go to all these AA meetings, which, looking back, I'm glad that I was given such a good education on addiction while I was in treatment for those 2 years, because in no way was I ready, but I learned a lot. They used to take me to the AA meetings, and I would be like, I'm Ashley, I'm not an alcoholic. I remember I used to say that to people all the time. Oh, I don't have that problem. I'm glad this works for you guys, but I'm an addict. I like drugs. I'm different. Let's see. After spending a couple of years in and out of treatment, I met this guy. I was selling Kirby vacuums door to door. If anybody's ever heard of that. I was actually pretty good at it. And I knocked on his door. He had tattoos, and like his house smelled like weed. And I was like, hey, and and so I moved in with him, and we dated. We were together for like 3 years, and he was new to town. I was still in Omaha at this time, and he didn't really know anybody, so I introduced him to my friends, and I introduced him to the drugs I like to do, and for a couple of years, we tried to get sober. We would have like 6 months clean, and then we would mess up, and we would have like a really crazy weekend, and then we would be good for a couple of months. It was just like back and forth for like a year or two. And this one night I talked him into getting some pills with me, and we even called it our last hurrah, because we had plans to move to California later to go to grad school in Northern California. And so I was like, it's our last hurrah. We had just had a garage sale, and we went and picked up, and I woke up in the middle of the night. I couldn't find him. He wasn't in the bed, and so I went and found him on the couch, and I thought he was just passed out, but I dragged him into the shower. He wouldn't wake up, and he was dead. And I called an ambulance, and they told me that he'd been dead for many hours, and I had tried to resuscitate him, and his mom was there, and it was horrible. I was 22. We actually just had the 11-year anniversary of his death last week. And so you'd think that that would make me be done. I was in Sioux City, Iowa at the time that he died. We were at his mom's house, actually. And I called my parents, and I was like, you know, the typical Ashley phone call from me growing up was, I need help, I'm in trouble, you guys need to come pick me up. And so my dad came and picked me up, and they drove me down to Jacksonville, actually. My aunt lives here, and my dad was planning a trip, and they wanted to get me out of the Midwest because my boyfriend had just died, and they were terrified of what I was about to do. And trust me, I was scared too, because the day he died, I was ransacking our house looking for the drugs, and I couldn't find them anywhere, because I was going to do all of them. I was going to kill myself, and I couldn't find them. And it wasn't until years later that I realized that they were in his pocket, and that's why I couldn't find him, because they took him away. Anyways, my parents drove me down to Jacksonville, and that's one of the reasons I ended up moving here later, is because Jacksonville's always kind of been my safe haven. But I was staying with my aunt, and I was 22. Yes, I'm away from all the drugs, but I'm old enough to drink now. And I don't know how to sleep without doing drugs. And so as soon as I got here, I went to the liquor store, and I bought one of those giant bottles of wine, the big ones. And the first night I drank it, I remember drinking the bottle down so there was like that much left. And I remember very viscerally, like clearly thinking, I'm probably an alcoholic too. Because I just wanted to finish it. Like, it was just that same feeling that I got with the pills, like I want more, I need more. And that's how I felt drinking that bottle of wine. I remember thinking that, and then just like, whatever, I'm putting that thought out of my head, because I was not ready to grieve. I did not know how to grieve, and I just started drinking. And so that night was the first night where I drank for like 8 years straight. I don't think that I took a single day off unless I was in the hospital. And so I ended up going back to my hometown, and I keep an eye on the time. I have the whole hour, so I'm giving you guys the long version. So I ended up going back to Omaha, but once I got there, I just wanted to get out of there. And so I ended up getting a job working in sales. I was basically like a ticket scalper on the internet. I was a ticket broker. And they flew me up to Chicago to train me. And once I got to Chicago, I was like, I want to live here. And this is where my geographic changes started. It was just a few months after he had died, but I immediately ran to Chicago. And it was a really good paying job. I dropped out of college for it. I was studying biology, actually, and I ended up working in sales for the longest time. And once I got to Chicago, I was making a lot of money. I had a very pretty apartment in a high rise. I had all the nice clothes. I had a cute boyfriend. Everything looked pretty good, and except for on the inside. What you couldn't see was the broken glass all over my floor every night, and the bloody footprints from me stepping in it. That would happen a lot in that apartment particularly. Sure, my apartment looked nice, but my neighbors had noise complaints every night for me and my boyfriend fighting with each other. But I was delusional. I didn't even think for a second that it might be the alcohol. I just thought, Chicago sucks. Like, these people suck. I need to get out of here. And the company I worked for had an office in Fort Lauderdale. So I called them and was like, hey, can I move to Fort Lauderdale? And they said yes. And so I moved to Fort Lauderdale. And I basically did the same thing there. I got a nice apartment, made a bunch of friends, and then just continued to be a tornado through everybody's life. And I was able to maintain that I was kind of okay on the outside, because I paid all my bills. I lived in a nice neighborhood. I had good clothes. I had a good job. But my life was just in chaos constantly. And I was not a good person. I was not a good friend. I was not, I had to make amends to every single one of my roommates when I got sober, because I was not fun to live with. And I was not a good employee either. it was hard for me to acknowledge that because I had a job when I got sober, and I had been at it for 7 years. But it was a very alcoholic job. It was very much like fast money and gambling and high pressure and very addictive. And every day when I would get off of work, I would just be like overstimulated, and I would just get blackout drunk to cope with the stress from my job. And so like life was not easy. It was always difficult. And I always just didn't understand like why other people seem to get this life thing. Like what is my problem that like I can't figure this out. And so Chicago didn't work out. Now I'm in Fort Lauderdale. That's still not working out. I made this really smart decision to date the CEO of the company I worked for. And that was really stupid because I really loved that job and I was really good at it. And things did not work out. Shocker. And once things didn't work out, I told him like, we're cool. Like I'll still work here. I'm one of your sales reps. Like just act like it never happened. And that worked for a few months. But then it didn't work anymore. And he started to retaliate against me. He started to harass me and stalk me. I ended up having to leave my job. There were restraining orders involved. And I just drank more and more and more to cope with it. I ended up moving to Miami because I didn't want him to know where I lived. And so I moved to Aventura, which is like a fun neighborhood in Miami. Super fun for an alcoholic like myself. And I decided that, so up until this point, I'm only drinking, guys. Like that, it had been like 6 years of only drinking. And like I said, I looked okay, but on the outside. But once he started stalking and harassing me, I couldn't really take it anymore, and I made the right decision that it was time to get back on Xanax. And I picked up a friend of mine one day to go. We were about to go to this boat party in the Biscayne Bay, and I think I like manifested it or something because he had my drug of choice with him in the car, and I said yes. And it was like, I'm not kidding when I tell you, it was like 3 years of absolute hell that began when I took that one little green pill. And it turned me into a different person. I just completely, like when they say this disease is progressive, I kind of look at like my addiction to those pills is progressive because I was worse than I've ever been. I totaled like 4 cars. I started stealing again. I did drugs that I never thought I would do. I was hanging out with people that I should never have been around. Every day I was throwing up. I was so sick all the time. And eventually I did get hospitalized. I wasn't really eating much, and I was drinking around the clock, and I was staying up for days on end, and I ended up in the hospital with pancreatitis. I see some people nodding in here. If you haven't heard of pancreatitis, it's caused by heavy liquor consumption. And I got that at 27 years old, and it was like the most painful thing I've ever been through. I was in the hospital for like 11 or 12 days, and while I was there, they gave me a drug test, and while I was passed out, and it lit up like a Christmas tree as I failed the drug test for so many different things, and they showed that to my parents, and so now the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows that my addiction is still killing me, because back in the day we all knew Ashley had a problem when I was 18, 19, but for a few years there we were like, okay, she has a job, she's got a house, like she's gonna be okay. And now I'm back in the hospital because I almost drank myself to death. And so they had a guy come from NA actually, and he came and 12-stepped me while I was in there. And the first couple of days I argued with him, like, I don't have a problem, what the fuck are you doing in here? But by the end, he came back every single day while I was there. And by the end of the 11 days, he had me convinced that I needed to go to a meeting when I got out. And so when I got out of the hospital, I did go to an NA meeting at 11 o'clock at night, and there were only like 2 other people there, and it was really weird. And they gave me a reading, and I just started crying. And I got up and left. And I went home, and I poured a giant glass of wine. And that was when I started to wrap my head around that, like, I am an alcoholic. Because up until that point, I thought that I could quit whenever I wanted. I just didn't want to yet. And once they told me in the hospital, you cannot drink for 6 months. Your body has to heal. So you cannot drink for at least 6 months. And if you drink in the 6 months, the pancreatitis is going to come back and it's going to be permanent. And I went home and drank. And so anytime I think that maybe I'm not an alcoholic, anytime that little voice in my head says, you don't have a problem, I try to remember that I went home and drank after I felt like I had a hot knife stabbing in my front and my back for 10 days. Like, if I ever think I don't have a problem, I just have to remember that, because that's where my disease takes me. And so once I got back out of the hospital, kept drinking. Nobody would drink with me anymore because I, almost drank myself to death. And so I obviously chose the alcohol over all the people in my life, because nobody would drink with me anymore, so I just drank alone. And I started to plot my escape out of South Florida. I told my family that I was moving to Jacksonville to get sober. I was honestly on a lot of Xanax and drinking at the time. I don't remember a whole lot about planning the move here. I kind of moved to Jacksonville in a blackout. And my parents, I told everybody I was coming here to get sober, but the truth is I was coming here to drink alone and die, because I wanted everybody to leave me alone. That's what I did. I got here and I drank alone around the clock for 8 months. And by this time I had been promoted to a role in my company. I think that they just wanted to keep paying me or something, because I had been promoted to a role where I was not doing anything. I was just getting paid to literally sit at home and drink, which was perfect for me. God doing for me what I can't do for myself, I guess. Those were the worst 8 months of my life. We talk about in AA, remember your last drunk? Mine was 8 months long, and it was the first 8 months I lived in Jacksonville, and it was miserable, and I was alone. I was throwing up it was just horrible. I remember the only person who ever saw me was the alcohol delivery guy, and he, one time he delivered my alcohol in the morning, obviously, because I'm an alcoholic. I always got it delivered in the morning. And he asked me, "Is this all you do?" My heart broke a little. So I lied and told him I had friends that helped me drink this, and I didn't. And one day I woke, I had not gone to work. I had been calling in for the job that I didn't have to do anything. I was calling in and saying that I was depressed and that I was sick. And I didn't realize it then, but I was very sick. I wasn't lying. I was very, very sick. I woke up one morning and it was just the alcohol wasn't working anymore. It was like I could not drink enough for it to make me feel better. It was not working. And I just knew I cannot keep doing this. And so right now I have 3 choices. I can kill myself, I can go punch a cop and get arrested, or I can go to treatment. And in my blackout, drunken stupor, I started calling treatment centers. And I found the one with the tallies actually, but I was hell-bent on going there for some reason. I don't know. I wish I wouldn't have actually, but that's where I ended up going to treatment. That was February 21st, 2020. That was the last time I drank. And when I got to treatment, they handed me this book. You guys might have seen it. I had been given this book a whole bunch of times. A lot of them. I don't know what happened to all those ones. So I never read it before. But this time I read the book. And I read it with a green highlighter. I love seeing my little green highlights in this book. I wanted to read something to you guys actually, because it just describes the way I felt those last weeks or those last months. And some of you might relate to this. But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Here's the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet you let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. That's me. And it's crazy because I'm actually pretty social, but when I drink a lot, I'm not. And so I read the big book while I was in there. And my thoughts were like, oh my God, how do they know? Like, how do these people in 1934 know exactly how I feel? There's this line in the Big Book, few will know loneliness such as the alcoholic. That I think was the line that sold me when I read the book in treatment, because I felt so lonely. And I didn't know that was a symptom of alcoholism. I thought that I was broken. I thought that I was missing some pieces that everybody else got. But here was everything about me in this book. And that blew my mind. And so while I was in treatment, I started to like really wrap my head around me joining AA when I'm out of there. And I started looking at the 12 steps on the wall and started, even though I didn't have a sponsor yet, I started trying to work the first 3 steps in my head. Step 1, am I powerless over alcohol? I mean, look where I'm at. Like, I don't have keys, I don't have a phone, I don't have any friends. Like, my mom has me blocked. Like, yeah, I'm powerless. That was obvious. But I'm an atheist, so the other steps are, no. But while I was in there, I was desperate enough, and I was willing to try to look at things a different way, because I just knew, like, I had no fight left in me. I had surrendered. When I think about surrender in step 1, to me, it's like I'm in a fight every day with alcohol. And I keep going into the ring. I keep picking it up, and I keep trying to fight, and I keep getting my ass kicked every single time. But how do I stop that from happening? I don't get in the ring. If I wave my surrender flag and I stop fighting, then I don't have to keep living like that. So I started to surrender while I was in treatment. I did have my treatment center actually closed because I got sober about 2 or 3 weeks before COVID hit the country, and so they closed down because they freaked out. Yeah, I have really good timing. And so we had to leave, and I had been sober for 17 days, and I had signed a thing that I was going to be there for 45, and I did not trust myself at all. I was very, very scared of myself. I was scared of alcohol. I was scared of being alone. But I remember they told me, when you get out of here, go to a meeting before you even go home, go to a meeting. And all the clubhouses were starting to close too, but I went to Penman. There was supposed to be a meeting there, but the doors were locked and there were signs on the door. And there was another guy outside, and he walked by me and he said, "Are you an alcoholic?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "How many alcoholics do we need to have a meeting?" And I said 3, even the answer is 2. I just didn't know the answer. The answer is 2. I just didn't know how to say I don't know yet. So we went and sat down and we had a meeting, and a few other people showed up, and I put my hand up and I said, "I need help." And somebody helped me. And if you take anything away from my little speech tonight, it's to accept help from other people. All those other times that I'd showed up at AA meetings, people tried to help me, and I wouldn't let them. But this time in my life, I actually let that woman help me. She introduced me to my sponsor, who is still my sponsor today, and thank God for that woman. She got me started on the steps right away. I would do a step a week, and I didn't realize then what important work I was doing. All I knew was that this girl kept showing up to pick me up, and I just kept going with her. And a lot of people are really scared of the 4th and 5th step. That made me feel better than any drug I've ever done in my life. So the purpose of this 12 steps is to manufacture a spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakenings, I've done some reading on them, and throughout history, they really only happen to people who are at rock bottom. You have to be at a point where you are just desperate and willing to let a crack be in your ego. And I think when you get desperate enough to start working the 12 steps, there's that crack in your ego. And then somehow you have this spiritual awakening at the end of it all. For me, I've had a lot of different spiritual awakenings throughout my recovery. I'll tell you about the first one. It was when I was in treatment. They had the people coming in for the meetings, and this guy said, he said, if you want the obsession to drink to go away, you need to pray and ask God to remove the obsession to drink. And I was like, I don't believe in God. I can't do that. And he was like, do it anyways. Even if you don't believe, just say it to thin air and see what happens. And so for a couple of nights I said that. And one day I woke up while in treatment after praying that for like 2 or 3 nights, and I woke up and the obsession was gone. And that was when I suddenly believed in a higher power, because up until that day I was obsessed with alcohol. Like, I had a phobia of running out of it. It was pretty much all I thought about all day, every day, was about when can I drink, how can I get more alcohol, how much can I drink, do I have any left? Like, that was it. It was just a constant. And so when I woke up and it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but the obsession to drink was gone. And so they made a believer out of me before I even left treatment. And so yeah, anyways, I backtracked a little bit. So I started working the 12 steps. Like I said, I got sober. There was not a lot of meetings open, so we ended up getting meetings set up on Zoom, where I actually met my friend Stacy, who came with me tonight. I really thought about going back out and drinking again, because I thought I got sober at like the worst time possible. But this Zoom group really saved my life. I met all of these wonderful people who taught me how to be a friend. They taught me how to have friends. I ended up getting really involved in the group, and I was the secretary of the group for a little while there. And I had touched on the 4th and 5th step a little bit. Those steps were not really what I was afraid of. I was very, very afraid of steps 8 and 9. I was not in the game of apologizing to people. I was more likely to block you and move to another city before you got an apology out of me. I just would pretend people didn't exist. So I was very, very scared of the amends step. I thought that like me and my sponsor were going to get in my car and we were going to go drive to Fort Lauderdale and Miami and do a little victory tour and say sorry to everybody. And I didn't want to do that, but I did want to stay sober. So I was willing to do the amends. And let me tell you, the amends process has probably been the most incredible part of all of my recovery for me. It's turned me into an adult who takes responsibility and accountability for herself. When I got sober, I had this friend who, me and her hadn't spoken in a few years, but I missed her terribly. And we just stopped speaking because of my drinking and the actions and the behaviors that I was doing when I was friends with her. And so we weren't talking. And I missed her so much. And I put her on my amends list, and she sat in the no column, like, no, I'm not ready to do this, but I know I need to. And she sat in that column for like almost 2 years. And I lost sleep over this amends, just like hoping someday I'll get the courage to tell her I'm sorry, to say something to her. And one day I woke up and I finally felt ready, and I wrote her this letter. And it took her a few days to respond to me, but she eventually did, and she accepted my apology. And just a few months ago, she actually moved to Jacksonville to live closer to me. And we go hiking every weekend. We go kayaking. Like, she just texted me cheers right before I came to speak. Like, that's incredible to me that I actually got a relationship back that was like totally gone. And that's just one of my amends stories. Like, I have so many more of people that I just completely had lost from my life who are back in my life in the most beautiful ways because of the program. Being sober is a real journey. I didn't really know myself when I got sober. I thought I did. I thought I was this obnoxious party girl who was in your face and just that's who I thought I was. But it turns out, like, I'm actually pretty reserved and pretty smart, and I'm a completely different person than I thought that I was. And I sort of had this like identity crisis for a while, like, who am I? And I think I hear a lot of people say stuff like that we just don't know who we are anymore. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what my hobbies were. And so I just started trying and doing a lot of different things. I have a life today that is full of fun things, awesome friends. Like, every weekend, I'll just be driving and just my eyes will well up with tears because I'm like so thankful and I'm just in disbelief that this is my life today. From someone who was agoraphobic and afraid to leave her house, throwing up every morning, and her neighbors probably thought she was the fucking weirdest person ever, to today where like I have a job that I love. I have friends that I really love who love me. I'm super close to my family. My life is awesome. It's not perfect every day. Yeah, I was very disappointed when I found out that getting sober doesn't mean life's perfect all the time. I thought that's how it would work. It turns out I still have to like deal with stuff and bad things happen. Just last year, I actually got sued for a car accident that I caused in 2017. Yeah, they can do that. They can sue you years and years later. And so at 3 years sober, I lost my driver's license again. And I've got my license back a whole bunch of freaking times, and I'm so sick of getting it back. And so at 3 years sober, I got sued. But what was weird about it was how I handled it. It was like instant acceptance. And it was just like accountability. I paid it. And I even told the lady's lawyer to tell her I'm sorry, because I don't know what kind of problems I caused in her life. Yeah, she drove an Audi that I paid for. She must not be that hard off, but the thing is, I don't know what that car accident did to her life. I don't know if it caused marital problems. I don't know if she's had back pain for years ever since then, or something. Maybe she got a divorce and she really needs the money and her lawyer told her, this chick you could sue. I don't know the whole story, but I do know that I trust my higher power and that everything that happens to me is to teach me a lesson. I feel like I've probably gone over, but yay AA, thanks for letting me share.